Now let's take a look at the filter. I'm going to go ahead and again load our default patch here. And we select the filter here. And we have multiple filter types because this is a multi-mode filter. So we have a 4-pole low pass, 2-pole low pass, 1-pole low pass, 2-pole band pass, 2-pole high pass, and a 2-pole notch. Those are going to be our 6 primary filter types. Once we go past that, we've got the 4-pole low pass VCS, 2-pole low pass VCS, 1-pole low pass VCS, 2-pole band pass VCS, 2-pole high pass VCS, and 2-pole notch VCS. Then we get into these that have the star after them. The star designates that the filter is now self-resonant with a high resonance setting. So you have 4-pole, 2-pole, and 2-pole band pass that are self-resonant. And then you have those versions of the VCS filter. The difference between the VCS filters and the regular filters is a circuit gets engaged in the filter modulation section here, whether we're using LFOs or envelopes or some auxiliary mod. And what that filter does is it slews the high frequency content of these modulation source just as the EMS Synthi used to do, which provides a very unique characteristic. Let's just go ahead and pull up our mixer. We're just going to listen to a single oscillator here. So here we have our high pass filter. Actually, let's start at the low pass filter. So as we move the joystick in this direction, it's controlling the cutoff frequency, and this is controlling the resonance. Now these normal filter types, the resonance is tamed so they won't break into self-oscillation, so you have a little bit more musical control over them. The other thing you'll notice is this oscilloscope display window is showing you the full range of cutoff frequency for the filter, and you can see the joystick is able to take you through that full range. Now for instance, if we were to assign the LFO and go to the LFO and speed it up, now we can see that LFO at 100% is able to sweep the filter over its full range. Let's speed up that LFO a little bit more. And we can see it's actually clamping along the top there. So as we increase this filter cutoff frequency, these things are all getting summed together, and it's clamping either at the high point or the low point there. So you want to keep in mind that you don't always want full 100% modulation of LFO, especially if you're using it with the envelope, because the envelope, let's turn that up and let's pull up a decay time. There you can see that our envelope is covering the full cutoff range just as our joystick is here. So the other thing I need to point out here is all these modulation amounts for the filter cutoff are centered around this initial cutoff frequency. So if we take this back to 0, and this is our initial cutoff frequency, as we increase our envelope amount, it's going to brighten and dull that filter cutoff. Let's go down an octave here. Same with the LFO. It's making that filter brighter and duller than the initial cutoff frequency. We can go negative as well, or clear it out just by pressing that encoder switch. And the reason why we do that is, number one, it imitates some of the most popular synths, such as the 303, the EMS Synthi, but it also keeps everything within this certain range. Otherwise, you know, if you're applying only a positive modulation source, such as a typical envelope, you would basically always have to have your cutoff frequency turned all the way down to sweep through that full range. And this gives us more range control by centering all these modulations. Again, here we have a lock feature similar to the mixer, and the way that works is we could dial up a filter frequency, turn the lock on, and that prevents us from accidentally changing the filter cutoff or resonance settings. That comes in really handy, especially when you're using the filters as an audio source themselves, say to create a kick drum or other percussive sounds. Let's go ahead and remove that lock. Just check out these other filter types. So here's the 1-pole. Here's a 2-pole bandpass. 2-pole high pass. Now something you should keep in mind about the high pass is it's one of my favorite filters when I'm creating bass sounds, because since you're rolling off the low end and your resonance is boosting that cutoff point of the lowest frequency, you're actually boosting the low frequency content, creating a much fuller bass sound, which normally you wouldn't think of when applying a high pass filter to a bass sound. But here you've got a 2-pole notch. It provides a nice phasey sound. And here you start getting into the VCS filter type. So in order to show you those, let's go ahead and dial up an LFO. And the LFO, I'm going to select a square wave. I'm going to modulate this LFO frequency with the stick here. Let's go stick X. Now let's go to a little brighter filter here. Now you'll notice there, as I increase the frequency of that LFO, what's happening is it's actually being low passed and the amplitude is coming down. So it's not modulating it as much, and the edges are becoming much smoother instead of a sharp turn off and on. Now in comparison, I can go back to a standard 2-pole low pass. And you can hear how much difference there is there. Let's go ahead and try a sawtooth. So there's your typical filter versus the EMS type. It just provides a nice smooth round sound. And then let's get up into some of these self-resonant filters. And I'm going to turn off all my mixer sources, so we're just hearing the filter self-oscillate. Now we can turn down the resonance to the point where the filter is no longer self-oscillating. So again, there's more of a normal filter response. Now let's go to the 2-pole low-pass VCS. And you've probably heard that effect before. And so again, similar to the oscillator modulation section here, where you've got LFO and envelope and then your controls on the left hand side, you've got the same setup here in the filter section, so that, for instance, if we want to control the amount of LFO modulating the filter, we could dial up additional controls such as touch. So that modulation amount increases. If we increase our touch, now I could bring up this as well. And also, we hear the same filter frequency. We could go ahead and press this encoder, turn that keyboard icon on, which means the filter cutoff is going to track the keyboard. We could do like a mod wheel, or we could assign the other stick, let's say stick Y. So this is controlling the rate, this is controlling the And then you have this auxiliary mod here. You've got the envelopes. There's lots of things you could do. For instance, you could use LFO4 to modulate the amplitude of LFO for the filter. That's going to produce some weird results. Here we can press that encoder and turn our control modulation off. You have the envelope. Again, let's clear this LFO out, turn the envelope up, and go adjust our envelope time here. Now we can turn repeat on for that envelope. Now even the envelopes, you can hear they are getting low passed because of our filter type here. Let's go back to a normal. There we go. And of course we could do all sorts of fancy stuff here with the envelope and morphing it to different times. We've already explained that in the oscillator envelope, so we won't spend too much time there, but you could assign all sorts of different things, like let's say you assign an LFO4 to control the amplitude amount of that repeating envelope. Let's go to LFO4. And then we can clear that out. We can also apply some auxiliary mods here. Let's turn this up. Now we're going to assign touch to control our cutoff frequency. Or we could do something like mod wheel. We could do stick X. Mix 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to be the sources that we've assigned here in the mixer. So for instance, let's say we want to assign an oscillator to modulate the filter, but we don't actually want to listen to the oscillator going through the filter. What we can do is set up oscillator 1 here. Let's turn our lock off and pan the mix to be one of these oscillators that's turned off. Now as we go in here, now let's go back to mix 1. Now we can adjust oscillator 1's frequency. We can adjust its waveform. We also can modulate the filter with both the filter's LFO and LFO1 if we want to do some kind of polyrhythmic type LFO effects. Now we might want to dial about both of these in to be about 50%. Otherwise they're both going to be competing for the full range. So there we have a sawtooth on our LFO's waveform, but let's go back here. We've got LFO1. Let's set that up to maybe be a ramp instead. Maybe we want a square wave instead. Now, something with the sample and hold is sometimes those abrupt changes don't sound really good, so we could dial up, say, the VCS type filters, which are going to slew those modulation steps. And there we can hear a portamento type effect taking place. Anyway, lots you can do there. And so going on from the filter, you also have an LFO for the filter. That's going to be the same as your LFOs for the oscillators, just dedicated for the filter. And you also have your envelopes dedicated for the filter. And again, those are same as your oscillator envelopes here. The only difference is instead of having a button for the standard times and the modulation times, you just access the standard times and the modulation times by hitting that envelope button twice.